we're going to literally jump right in. So what we're going to talk about today is the state of, first we're going to do some basic introductions, but then we're going to talk about the state of PR measurement today, the differences between advertising and PR measurement, what makes a PR firm worth the money, ways to measure the impact of a news story, how to justify your PR budget and leadership. And then we're going to leave this open to Q&A for all of you to ask any of your burning questions. So at any point here, if you do have questions, please just drop them in the Q&A and we will make sure that we get to those at any point. So very excited to introduce the webinar. My name is Aaron Friedman. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Propel. I've been in the marketing world for about 15 plus years and been part of agencies, been in-house, and now I'm over here at Propel leading marketing. And with me today, very excited, is Chris Penn. Chris is the authority. Chris is an authority on analytics, digital marketing, marketing technology, data science, machine learning, kind of a little bit of jack of everything. Awesome. He's a recognized thought leader, best-selling author, and keynote speaker. He has shaped 5 key fields in the marketing industry: Google Analytics adoption, data-driven marketing and PR, modern email marketing, marketing data science, and artificial intelligence, machine learning in marketing. And a fun fact, he's been a practitioner of the martial arts for over 20 years now, currently holds a 5th degree black belt in ninjutsu. And a really fun fact, I first met Chris about 15 years ago at a conference in Boston, and we both got to meet the Old Spice guy. And no, he would not take his shirt off for photos, but he was still super cool about everything. So welcome, Chris. Really excited to have you here. And I'm really, really excited about this webinar. So just a little quick background on Propel. Propel was founded in 2019 and launched as a CRM for PR, or what we call a PRM. And since then, we've rolled out many additional features to the core part of our platform, including the only native Gmail and Outlook pitch plugins, business outcomes from PR, so you can measure the ROI from your PR campaigns, as well as pitching preferences and AI-powered recommendations, so you can understand the top days of the week and times journalists like to be pitched. We're headquartered in Tel Aviv with teams based across the globe in New York, London, Miami, and we even have a team driving around the US in an RV, which is a cool little fact. Propel has over 150 customers, including Real Chemistry, Textron, and Surefy, and leading brands and agencies. And I want to pass it over to Chris to actually tell you a little bit about TrustInsights. So Chris, take it away.
We are a marketing and management consulting firm. If you have data or people who work with data and you feel like you're not getting enough out of either, that's what we do with. The rest of the slide you can read when you get to the slides, when you download the slides later. I'm not going to read this out loud because nobody likes marketing bedtime stories.
All right, cool. So before we get into the questions that a lot of people have submitted already, I want to start by walking us through some of the background on where PR measurement is today. So for starters, first, we're seeing a focus on earned media related investments. We're seeing a focus on earned media related investments continue to grow. So this is a report from the CMO survey from February. Hundreds of CMOs reported that their businesses expected to invest more in brand building versus traditional ad spend. We, of course, as a group, need to be mindful of more recent events like planning around a likely recession. But nevertheless, this shows room for a huge opportunity for those of us in PR, as earned media is really a crucial, earned media is integral to brand building initiatives. And the good news for those of us that are data minded is that this report also shows that data analytics is the new way for all things marketing, and was the largest area of growth. And I'm curious to know from anyone in the audience right now, type 1 in the chat if you feel that you're feeling this shift towards data analytics yourself. Let's see what the chat to right before.
I would type in the chat, but
yeah.
This was something that we were pushing when I worked agency side for a bunch of years, trying to get people to use any kind of data. And it was a Sisyphean task to do so. For those of you who are not up on your Greek scholarship, that is the guy who is perpetually cursed to push a boulder uphill repeatedly.
Then yes, and hopefully we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel from that, and that's not where we are anymore. Things have changed a lot.
Well, Go to the next
things
slide.
things are definitely changing. Let's say that much. Which is why, we're excited this is what makes us excited, is that, we're excited to discuss this question specifically on analytics, attribution analysis, and how you can have a significant impact on your own overall success, even as businesses are mapping out budget cuts. So, Chris, maybe you want to.
This is what I was.
Yeah. Go for these.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about in a bunch of industry surveys and things. When asked, PR practitioners said, what will you be measuring as KPIs in 2022? 94% measured coverage. Like, this is the, hey, we got some coverage, we got a placement, et cetera, which is good. It's the output of your work. 60% said measuring social media mentions, which I thought was interesting, mainly because I don't really know, it's tough to draw a line from there down towards the bottom of the funnel, or towards the bottom of the funnel. 19% said add value equivalents, to which I would say, stop it. Add value equivalents, measuring add value equivalents in 2022 is like measuring in like qubits and smoots, right? When there are better systems like metric, AVEs really are in every form an invalid form of measurement. And I really wish people would just make them go away. And finally, the one that I think makes the most sense, and the one that both Aaron and I focus a lot on in our respective businesses, is measuring some kind of bottom line impact. Because at the end of the day, the people who are signing our checks, whether it's agency clients, whether it's our internal stakeholders, they don't care about how many placements they got. They don't care about what the reach was. They care, is this going to help me earn my bonus? And is this going to help move the needle towards the things that the C-suite and the board care about? And if the answer is no, you're not going to get budget. You're not going to get investment of time and people. So we wanted to encourage everybody, start working on the mathematical models you need to get to bottom line impact, and tools like Propel can get you part of the way there.
Yeah. So this is what this one piece about ROI and measuring the bottom line is what we're going to focus on for, I think, a lot of the questions that we got. And it's definitely going to, if it doesn't directly focus on it, it's certainly going to tie it back in. So let's get into that AMA, where we're going to discuss a lot of the great questions that we got leading up to this. And again, we got a lot of questions. If we don't get to yours, we will do our best to incorporate them in future discussions, in different blog posts or something of the nature, maybe another webinar with Chris, who knows? So let's dive into those. So the first question that we got over here, a lot of these questions, we kind of grouped together a bunch of them. So this one had to do with differences between advertising and PR measurements. So let's see, the first question over here was, let me pull that one up. Is public relations more expensive than advertising? Chris, do you want to dive in on that one first?
Here's the thing about that. I feel like that question asks kind of the wrong question. It's not whether something's expensive or not. It's a question of whether you're getting what you're paying for, right? If I have a black box in front of me and it takes $100 bills, but out of the side, $500 bills come out, and I put $100 bill in and $500 bills come out, assuming it's not all counterfeiting. How much money am I going to put in that black box? I'm going to put as much money as fast as I can into that box, because more money's just shooting out the side, right? And so advertising and PR, you have people, you have teams, you have budgets for campaigns and influencer relationships or display advertising, whatever. It's not a question of expense. It always comes down to, are you getting your money's worth? And the reason this becomes a question, I think a more abstract question, and Aaron, you can pitch in on this, is that if people aren't good at measurement to begin with, then the only thing that they have to compare is cost. If you don't have results and ROI, and all you have is a cost number, then the natural instinct is to make decisions on the number you have, and that's how you get into, the lowest bidder wins, race to the bottom stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I think that what it comes down to a lot of this is that, it comes down to a lot of this, first of all, like Chris is saying, tying it back to the ROI, but it comes down to the quality of what you're actually getting. If you're going to get a good quality, you can spend a lot of money on something because you know that that's going to be good. It's good quality, good results. Well, I shouldn't even say it's the quality. It's really about the results. If you could get great quality and get no results from it. So, that makes a big difference. But yeah, it really ultimately is going to come down to that. Like, what are you going to get out of this? And if it's something that you pull, if it's going to be a turning point for your business because you're investing that, then yeah, do that. Spend a lot of money on it because you're going to get a lot back out of it. And if you're not, and you're just kind of like, it's, all vanity metrics, or you're not actually able to prove anything, then I would probably stop that immediately. One of the next questions that we had over here, which is related, is what are the main differences and similarities between PR and advertising agencies? So,
And when you think about it, they want the same thing, right? When you have take your customer journey, right? Awareness, consideration, evaluation, purchase, ownership, loyalty, evangelism. That cycle that customers go through. At every point in that journey, there are things that both PR and advertising can do, because they're both PR and advertising fulfill the same function today, which is get attention, direct the attention where you need it, right? It might be paying, it might be, pre-roll ads, it might be an influencer, it might be a piece of coverage in a trade magazine, but whatever it is, you are trying to get attention from wherever it is and pull it kicking and screaming to your stuff. And that is what is completely similar about PR and advertising. The difference is in the how you do that, but the strategy is the same.
yeah, totally. So I saw a great little adage on this. That's advertising is what you pay for, PR is what you pray for, which is hence the emojis. But that's I think that in many ways what Chris is saying is that the strategies are very much the same. One of them you're maybe paying for, but you're ultimately trying to do the same thing. You're trying to get the same results, just a different way of doing it.
Exactly. And I think the one area where PR has a broader remit and can have more impact, paid media and advertising typically don't do a whole lot with owned media, right? In a modern public relations strategy, yes, you go out and you get attention from other sources, but there's also an appropriately large focus on your brand, becoming a publisher of your own, becoming a media source of your own, building a community that people want to be a part of. And if you do that, if you become a publisher, guess what? It's the easiest pitch in the world, right? You don't have to you don't have to have a PR person convince you to pitch your own blog or YouTube channel or Discord or whatever. That community is something that you can go straight to, and leveraging the power of people's networks. If you've got something really fantastic that that's news that people are legitimately excited to hear about, when you bring it to your community, it has a multiplier effect out through the landscape to your industry if it's truly newsworthy. And again, this is another huge similarity between PR and advertising. If what you have for sale, because advertising sometimes has products and services for sale, PR has ideas for sale, right? Getting a publication today. That's why you built a CRM, right? It's a sales process. If what you have for sale is terrible and nobody wants it, then you're not going to get results out of PR or advertising.
Yeah, totally. Well, so Chris, let me segue into that next question, though. A related question around that is, how about PR versus advertising measurement?
It's the same thing. So again, that customer journey cycle, there are KPIs at every stage of the customer journey life cycle, right? At awareness, there's things like brand recall or unaided recall, or even branded organic search, which is one of my favorite metrics. How many times does somebody search for your company or product or service by name? How many times a month does someone search for Aaron Friedman or Propel PR? Those are examples of branded search. That's at awareness. Consideration is you're looking at things like people downloading ebooks or registering for newsletter or showing up for webinars, right? How much are people trying to figure out whether you belong in the short list of brands they're going to consider for their purchase? evaluations even deeper. This is where people forget that PR can be an enormously valuable tool for that evaluation phase, because that third-party validation, reviews and such, can help persuade a buyer. Like, okay, I'm evaluating, I'm looking at the number of star reviews you got on G2 Crowd or whatever, and people seem to like your software better. And that can be done with PR. Every stage in the customer journey has a KPI, and PR and advertising should be managing and doing metrics to those stage KPIs. How much of your branded organic search is coming from your brand awareness campaigns? How much of your brand organic search is coming from your PR campaigns? And if you can split that out using something like Uplift modeling, you can get an understanding of what's working. And this, again, this works for both PR and advertising.
Right, absolutely. So let's hop over to the next slide. So what makes a PR firm worth the money? So the questions we got around this are PR firms worth the money? How do you know if a PR agency is worth it? What are some of the most valuable KPIs for public relations? I think that they're actually somewhat connected.
Well, how do you know, Aaron? How do you know whether a PR agency is worth it or not? I mean, you've been in the field for a while.
Yeah, look, I think that oh man, I think that ultimately, you know if a PR firm is worth it if they're actually producing, if they're actually doing good work, if they're really, if they're speaking the language of not just like how many hits are you going to get, but like how is this going to affect certain parts of your journey? How does this kind of bake into the rest of your marketing plan? If they're thinking about this kind of like holistic approach and how, they don't view PR as like a standalone thing, but it's really part of everything that you're doing day to day, then I think if that's the case, then yeah, it's probably worth the money. But ultimately, is it tying back to some kind of ROI? Is it getting you some benefit? Is there something you can track back and say they're actually doing a good job? If all you're relying on is them saying, I got you placed here, here, and here, then maybe not. That's why we actually have these business outcome dashboards in Propel, because these actually give us, you can start to drill in and understand how your campaigns are actually performing. They're synced up with Google Analytics, so you can start to see what kind of impact you're getting from the actual campaigns you're running.
Exactly. I'll like to point out that Propel's lovely interface and nice design is on the left here. On the right here is my horrendously ugly data science environment. One of the things that you can do with public relations data is take that data, those activities that you have or whatever, and note in your data when campaigns are running. Maybe you've got a big hit in the Wall Street Journal. We know hits have a half-life of around 7 days, 3 to 7 days. So you would mark that day plus the 7 days afterwards as like, that was the big hit period of time. And then using tools like Uplift modeling, you would be able to say, here is the impact of that on these other channels. We know what the baselines are. We know what we'd have gotten without the big hit. So if we model what would have happened without the big hit, we have the data with what happened with the big hit. The delta between the two is the uplift. And this is data that can be used to calibrate on branded organic search. It can be used to calibrate really on anything down the funnel. So when you think about those KPIs along the customer journey and where you're being held accountable for them, you can model based on that outcome the uplift that occurred because of a particular campaign. This level of measurement is what I would expect when you ask the question, what makes a PR firm worth the money? When they can explain how they measure to show the lift in the metrics and the KPIs that you care about, right? The PR firm that says, oh, we measure everything on coverage. Well, that's an activity. That's not a business result, right? If they say, hey, we got you 14% more branded organic search traffic, and following the chain of evidence in your analytics, organic search traffic in general is 60% of your conversions worth $1,500. So therefore, the contribution that we added with our Uplift model shows that we added $250 of extra value that you would not have gotten, that incremental profit you would not have gotten without this campaign. That's how you know a PR firm is worth their money, when they can explain the model like that.
Yeah, I love that you say that though, because I think that that's something that a lot of people don't think about, is that reporting on pitching is basically just reporting at that's an activity. That's not an outcome. That's not a a real KPI. It's what you're doing. You're doing your job. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But what was the benefit? What was the impact from what you were doing? I think that that's so important. I like wish that that was a little bit more widespread in the industry, that people were talking like that.
One of the things, the problems that people have in PR and marketing in general, is that they don't understand what a KPI is. The answer that I use is simple. What are you going to get your bonus for, or what are you going to get fired for? Right?
Right.
Are you going to get fired? Like, if you work at an agency, are you going to get fired by the client if if you miss your target on number of pitches? Maybe so. And if that's what the client's paying you for, then that's what they're going to get. But if the client is saying, we want to see a business impact, right? We want to see an increase in organic search traffic. Well, then that defines your strategy. That defines everything that you should be focusing on and reporting on. And it gives you clarity. And if a client doesn't know what to measure on, this is where you can show some leadership and say, well, here are the different measures and different KPIs at each stage of the customer journey. Where do you want our help working? And can we agree on X as being the metric that is the KPI, the outcome that we are all going to judge ourselves on?
Yeah, it's actually this takes me way back, because one of the first jobs I ever had, it was in the very early days of social media, where I was working at a word of mouth marketing agency, and they were very careful not to call themselves a social media agency. And this was, again, very early days, like Twitter was brand new, it was a whole whatever. And the interesting thing about it was that I remember my boss at the time said to me, he's like, I don't care where people talk about me. If it means that I have to stand in the middle of the street and scream with a megaphone to get people's attention, that's what I'm going to do, if that's what's going to drive the business. If it's going to be on Twitter or it's going to be on Facebook, then fine too. But as long as it's tying back to where we're going to get that actual impact and where we're going to be able to see those results. And I guess I never really thought about it, but I think that probably shaped a lot of the way that I've always thought about just reporting and in general, just from that very side conversation he just had with me, because it all has to tie back into actual results, into where you're going to bring in the dollars.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Oh, cool. Let's jump on to the next question. So these questions revolve around ways to measure the impact of a news story. So the first thing, the first question we got here is, what is a tier 1 hit worth and how do you measure its impact? And the second one, well, let's get to the second one in a second, but maybe it was Chris. Let me kick off for that one. Just about a tier 1 hit versus tier 3 or something else a little bit lower. So this is a perfect example that I like to highlight a little bit, because everyone wants to be in the tier 1. Everyone wants to be in the New York Times. Everyone wants to be in the Washington Post. Everyone wants to be in those top headline in those top publications, because that's what everyone knows. They're the ones that you can frame on your wall. Those are the ones where you're going to be able to say, I was in the New York Times, and that's your success story right there. But practically speaking, when you look at things like, okay, yeah, it has a lot more unique monthly visitors. This New York Times is 124 million monthly visitors, whereas a much smaller tier whatever publication, Lawn and Landscape, has 90,000. So it's significantly smaller. But the difference is that look at the global response rates, right? The global response rate for the New York Times is about 3%, whereas the Lawn and Landscape has a 20%. And the difference there is so jarring, because if you're really trying to get results and you're really trying to maximize the ROI of what you're doing, you're probably better off going with those more niche, Lawn and Landscape type publications, as opposed to the big giant New York Times. There's a massive benefit, obviously, in saying I was written up by the New York Times, but that's really just, for your own praise. And it's a cool thumbs up. It's a little notch in your belt, but it doesn't necessarily tie into actual business results. Anything you want to, what are your thoughts on that?
So I have a couple of different things to argue about here. One, tiers of media publications is antiquated in this day and age, right? Yes, you have the New York Times, 124 million reach, right? But guess what? Casey Neistat has reach of 100+ million. Google Foods, Violet Orlandi, some of the our favorite YouTube stars go on to Twitch, and you can see Method and stuff in their channel with 1 million subscribers that all watch live when they are streaming. There is when we're talking about public relations, it's that literal word, relating to the public. The public isn't reading the Wall Street Journal, isn't reading the New York Times. Yes, they still are to some degree. There's a reason, for example, Fox News is legitimately the largest TV network in the country. That is objective truth. When you look at the demographics, though, it's people under 50 do not watch Fox News. So if you are trying to build share of mind with an over 50 sort of conservative audience, guess what? You've got to get your story on Fox News somehow. If you're pitching somebody, say your target audience is maybe 18 to 30 or 25 to 30, Generation M successful folks in business, you probably want to be advertising on, doing YouTube ad placements on specific channels that those folks watch, like Ethan, I can't remember his last name, Anna Kramling, as an example. Those are folks that have these massive audiences that are highly targeted, that if you know your audience, you can pitch there, do an interview with them, do a podcast episode with them or whatever, and you actually get better coverage because they don't have the rules that traditional journalism and broadcast do, right? Yes, getting on Good Morning America, amazing for like the 2.5 minutes you're on there. Would you rather that, or would you rather be on Hot Ones for 25 minutes, right? Being able to talk about stuff. So that's my big gripe about, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. You are 100% correct that the smaller a publication is, the more likely it is you're going to get their attention to begin with. And if it's targeted well, you win. If you think about it, how many CMOs are there in the Fortune 50? 50, right? Which means that if you had a magazine that had a circulation of 50, you might go, well, I don't know. Do I want to pitch this? Yes. If it's the magazine that goes to all 50 Fortune 50 CMOs, you don't need a placement in anything else, right? That is the one and only place you want to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Chris, the second question here that's related to this one was, how do you measure offline impacts of public relations?
So that's a really mathematically sound answer to this question. And here's how it works. This is what we call uplift modeling. I drew this based on my web analytics, but you have sort of these ups and downs, ebbs and flows in your traffic. Go in your Google Analytics account. You will see this. If you can look at by source medium, you can do some essentially some forecasting and say what is likely to happen in any given period of time. And then what you do is you mark in your data, this is when I got a hit, or online, offline, whatever. There's a specific period of time. And you'll note on the screen here, you can see in that yellow box, the amplitude of the waves for each channel is higher in that box. I did a very simple example here with effectively Bollinger Bands, just drawing lines on each of the curves there to show here's probably the range that would have occurred during that period of time. That difference where those little arrows are, that delta between what you probably would have gotten and what you actually got, that is your uplift. And this is something that is measured in every digital channel in your web analytics. And this is really valuable because online or offline, celebrity, influencer, doesn't matter. If you have a period of time where you know something has happened and you have plenty of data from all the other times, you can discount programs that are running all the time, like pay-per-click ads, display ads, YouTube ads. You're always on social. You're always on regular pitching. That uplift in those channels helps you understand what the impact was of the PR campaign at that time. And if you've got your Google Analytics set up properly, you then know what each channel's output is worth, because Google Analytics can do revenue forecasting. And so that uplift, you can say, here is the value of this uplift, because we know it contributed X amount of extra traffic to this channel. We know, a search visitors worth $3.22. They've got 100, extra search visitors that day. So that little uplift was worth $332 in forecasted revenue. Using this uplift modeling, this is how you measure impact of something that's offline that you did. And it doesn't have to just be web analytics, right? You can get data out of your marketing automation system. You can get it out of your CRM. You can get it from the beacons that you have at your shop, the little feet counters. Did your PR campaign on the days when the campaign was running show increases in your marketing channels and the number of people who walked through that front door? that's how you do this. It's not easy. Like it's not, you don't just sit down and do this by hand. You do have to use some software for it. But this is the mathematically most sound way to demonstrate the impact of PR.
Well, okay, so then this segues perfectly, Chris, into the next question, which is how do you justify your PR budget to leadership? So, meaning, well, you start that one off. Why don't you kick that one off? Because again, tying that back in with, what you're talking about with like demonstrating that kind of uplift modeling and everything else that you're going through right now. The best thing you can obviously do is to have everything clearly measured and have these very like clearly measured results and be able to like say like, this is what's happened, this is what I've done, this is the impact of what's going on. What are your thoughts?
Budgeting is a sales pitch, right? You are selling something. The person on the other side of the table who has the budget authority is the buyer. What are you putting in front of them? It's sort of a name your price arrangement. So if I put a small box of stuff in front of the table and you look at it and you go, that looks like it's worth about $500. And I'm like, no, it's worth $2,000. What's in that box is $2,000. I have to prove as a salesperson that it is worth you paying me $2,000 for this box of results, right? So as a salesperson, I have to understand, the results that I'm getting out of PR, what are they worth? And doing the uplift modeling and stuff is a big part of that. And then to be able to say to leadership, to someone, how much of this result do you want to buy, right? If in this box I know I can get $140,000 of extra inferred revenue per $100,000 spent. How many $140,000 units do you want to buy? Do you want one? Do you want two? Do you want half a unit? Because when you treat budgeting like a transaction, then when 3 months, 6 months, 9 months comes around and your stakeholders are like, well, why aren't we getting these results? Well, because you bought half a unit. I've given you half a unit. If you'd wanted to buy a full unit of my results, you have to have given me the budget. You have to paid me for the full unit of my results. You can't give me half the price and expect all the value. Like you can't go into Walmart and say, oh yeah, that bicycle is $100. I'll give you 50 for it. Like that's not how it works, right? So we have to change our mental mindset to think about what are we selling. And what value can we get for what we're selling? And if the answer is we can't, what we're selling doesn't get us the budget we want, then we did a poor sales job. And we did a poor sales job because our prospect, our stakeholder, didn't see the value in what we were offering it for sale.
Totally. The follow-up question to this one that somebody asked is, what can I do to improve my B2B telecoms companies, my B2B telecom companies PR on a low budget? I'll jump in there for a second, is that, if you're looking for a completely, no cost option, there are tools available. We just launched a free version of Propel that gives, limited access to a lot of our customers' favorite tools that make it easier to keep track of PR and see better results. And then from there, we've made a point of setting up the platform to be just the most affordable, PR platform on the market right now. So happy to connect about that one. But yeah, I mean, Chris, any other thoughts that you have there?
Is what your company has for sale really exciting and worth talking about, right? The easiest way to get PR is to have something worth talking about. If what you've got is a 2%, incremental increase over what else is in the industry, that's not a story anyone's willing to cover. That's not something that's going to attract an influencer. That's not something that's going to get people excited. If what you have to offer is a quantum shift in the industry that legitimately will change how people do work, then yes, you're going to have less of an issue getting PR. Think about a company like Apple, for example. Apple doesn't have to work terribly hard to get PR because people like their products. They have good products. And when there's news out, people legitimately want to say, yeah, I want to hear what Apple has to say. Part of that is also building brand loyalty. If you are a B2B telecom company, people say, it's very hard to get, brand loyalty in that space. No, it's not. Look at what T-Mobile did. T-Mobile took was probably the last place company in telecom in the United States market, and has since bought Sprint and is nipping at the heels of Verizon and AT&T because they completely revamped their product strategy, normalizing, making it stupid simple, and they have a long list called the uncarrier list of all the things that they hate and their customers hate, like extra fees, this stuff. And for their 10-year marketing campaign has been, let's stop doing stuff to people that they hate. Right? That's their marketing strategy.
Just be good to people.
Yeah, exactly. Just stop doing things that our customers hate. And what they've done is become a legitimate contender in the market. So if you've got a telecom company, figure out what people hate in the industry and then stop doing those things. And then you can make a campaign, a long-lived campaign about like, hey, we're annoying you less like this. Like this week, we're annoying you less by, it comes back to having something that is worth talking about.
Yeah, totally. Chris, the next question we got here, which I know you can probably go on for hours about, but is a recession coming?
Is a recession coming? Well, hey, the answer is yes. A recession is always coming. It's just a question of when. Right. When you look at what the National Bureau of Economic Research uses for its economic indicators to declare a recession retroactively, because it's only retroactive, 5 or 6 of the 8 indicators say things are going fine if strong inflationary pressures, and 2 of them are a little iffy. The bucket of metrics that I look at about 50-ish some odd metrics about the broad economy, and there are some things that are precursors to recession. So let's talk about a few of these. The jobs market is still really good, right? As evidenced by the fact that anyone who's tried to hire recently has been, like, hey, you're 12, you can work as account coordinator, right? We'll train you. So that's really good. Per capita personal income has dropped a bit, actually quite a bit since the start of the pandemic, because in the beginning of the pandemic, we just started handing out money to everybody, which was the right thing to do. Now that's coming back down. Oil has sort of started to stabilize, but gas and coffee, which are proxies for consumer things, are a crazy inflationary. Interest rates are going up very, very high comparatively. And then real GDP has actually started to soften. Real GDP is the output of a country's economic engine, right? So if it's stalling, right, if it's sort of hitting a plateau, that's a pretty good sign that something's going on under the hood. But the changes in interest rates are important. 97% of the money that exists is invented by banks, right? Because of fractional reserve lending. So the Federal Reserve Bank says you can borrow money from us, bank. Commercial bank says we're going to borrow this money. Great, we're going to lend it out. We are required to keep 10% of that money on hand. Called fractional reserve banking, that we can lend out 10x as much as we have, and every bank after that. So when you, Aaron, go and get a mortgage, you get a mortgage, you borrow from the bank that you have to pay that back in 30 years, and then the bank has to borrow from bank to pay off the house, right? And this is a very complex borrowing chain. The reason why interest rates matter is because when the government turns up what it costs to borrow, that effectively destroys money, right? It deletes money out of the system, which means you start to create more scarcity. The idea being that it reduces demand, which reduces inflation, because the way to control inflation is to make people buy less stuff, because and so we are at a point now where prices are very high and not really leveling off. And we've turned up the cost to borrow, destroying some money supply. The net effect of this is probably within 2 quarters, we will have conditions that resemble a recession. The wild card is employment. If the demand pullback softens the need for employment, then I think a recession is very likely. But if the increased monetary strictness does not change employment, then I think you will still continue to see the economy chug along, because if unemployment is at like 60-year lows, everybody who wants a job has one for the most part. There are, of course, exceptions, but if that keeps going, if that stays low, then you're not going to get that full recession because you keep having people earning money.
Yeah. Well, tell me what is it? So, but what does this mean for marketers? What does this mean for PR people? How do we respond to this kind of thing when, they're talking about, we were talking a minute ago about budgets. We were talking about budget cuts and all that stuff. Like, what do PR people do about all this?
It depends. It depends on a few things. From a business strategy perspective, and this has been true since 2019, cash flow is king, right? If your business is not cash flow positive, you need to fix that today. Cash flow is king. If your cash flow is positive, you can weather any storm. If your cash flow is negative, you can go belly up in the best market there is, right? That's just basic strategy. The same is true for us as individuals, right? Get your cash flow positive. Make sure that you're earning more money than you're spending every month, and you will get through any economic situation. From a hiring perspective, right now, the priority really is just hire whatever you can get. But as the market cools down, that will get easier. You'll have a little bit more choice. PR professionals who are running accounts for clients. If you don't have really good client services, you need to get good at it fast. If your client retention rates are low, that is priority number one to fix internally. You've got to keep your clients happy because you will be the first thing that they cut, right? PR has always been the redheaded stepchild in the marketing world and is the first budget to get cut. So if you are not proving your value with analytics and data and showing here's what we're doing to make you money, you are at risk. So retaining clients like that. And then the other thing is try to broaden your mandate where and when it's reasonable to do so, right? If you are a PR shop, but you see your client is having issues with content marketing, guess what? A writer is a writer, right? So if you got people writing pitches and stuff, you can retask them helping clients write and create content, and maybe broaden your remit and make it a little harder for you to be fired by the client.
Interesting. I like that. That's great. That's a great suggestion. So let's go on to the final questions that we have over here. The final questions that we had submitted. So these are a little bit more random and fun. So first of all, if anyone can guess what all these 4 different images here have to do with each other, please write that in the chat. I'd love to hear if you can figure that out. But so for the first question is, how can you predict if something is likely? I know this is your favorite question, Chris. How can you predict if something is likely to go viral?
Don't wear a mask and lick doorknobs and you will go viral.
That's the answer right there, folks. No, but so actually, maybe I'll jump in on this for a second. So I actually saw something really interesting the other day. There was an article that I read about how Chewy, the pet company, they actually went viral because there was a fascinating story where someone got a bag of food delivered, pet food delivered to them, and they called back the company and said, hey, it's sad actually, but he said, actually, can I return this because my pet passed away since I've gotten this, and I don't need it anymore. So Chewy wrote back to them and said, do us a favor, take the food, donate it to a shelter, we'll give you a full refund. And they also, without telling this person, they sent them like a bouquet of flowers, or it was a portrait of their pet or something like that. Something really just like, it's like genuine gesture that they made. And what was so cool about it though, and this story went viral, but not because of that one story. It's because people from all over the internet started responding to that tweet and saying, we had the exact same experience. They sent us a self-portrait of my pet and all this stuff. And it reminded me a lot of back in the day of like Zappos and the way Zappos handled customer service and all of these kind of crazy stories where you wanted to talk about these companies because they were just so genuine and they were so good. They weren't trying to fabricate that. You can't really, first of all, you can't predict if something's going to go viral. That you can't do, unless it's Chris's example that you could predict. But you can't predict if something's going to go viral, but you certainly can up your odds of something actually going viral if you're doing the right thing, and if you're showing like a real genuine step forward or foot forward on like your entire attitude towards things, it'll certainly help your odds. And once if that catches on, you're golden right there. But it's not a given, and there's really no way to predict that. I mean, Chris, what are your thoughts?
Oh, exactly. It's if you empower your employees and you invest in them a lot, both in training resources and equitable pay, you increase the odds that they will do the right thing by your customers. Take care of your people will take care of your customers. If they know they have the authority to do some outreach or to make an exception to the rules. The companies that don't go viral are the ones where we count every moment that you're not doing X or Y or Z, and they're very efficiently run companies, but they don't create memorable moments. And in some cases, the memorable moments that are created are the bad ones, like when you have a fast food worker, spitting in somebody's food that's caught on video and stuff. Well, that goes viral too. Why did that happen? Because it's a miserable place to work in your profession, and your company underpays you, and so you are creating more chances for negative viral opportunities out of that. So the levers to pull are real easy. Are you investing in your employees? Are you creating a working environment where they're empowered? Are you creating a working environment where they're happy? Everything that you do in those categories increases the likelihood that people will just do the right thing. And that story, the stories will get told based on that.
Totally. So the next question we had over here, we're actually running a little low on time, so just want to jump into these quickly. How do you measure influencers and their impact? And actually connected to that is actually, how should startups measure their, let's go with the first one. How do we measure influencers and their impact? We touched on this.
It's all the same.
We've touched on this a bunch already. Maybe let's dive into that a little bit more. That's the reason Casey Neistat's on here, by the way, because we already touched on that. As Chris was saying before, being mentioned nowadays, at least, and we see this all the time, is nowadays being mentioned by the Wall Street Journal. It's great, but I'd kind of rather be mentioned by Casey Neistat. I think I'm going to get a much stronger brand impact when I have an influencer like that who's talking about me, as opposed to one liner that I got in the Wall Street Journal.
Exactly. And the easiest way to start picking this apart to figure out if it's even reasonable is you have to do market research with your customers. You need to sit down with them, focus groups, one-on-ones, interviews, shadowing, whatever, and say, where do you get your news? Where do you spend your time? When you're about to make a decision on a purchase, who do you listen to? And make a list of all that media and understand, take the ABM approach, not just you, but the people that you assign to do the research to figure out where do they get their information, right? If you assign putting the vendor shortlist together to the intern, and the intern is just surfing YouTube for videos about, marketing automation software, guess what? You are pretty clearly going to have better results if you're paying attention to where your audience is getting their information. But the only way you get to that is through market research. So that, and then measuring it is exactly the same. It's all the things we talked about earlier, like uplift modeling.
Yep. Yeah. One of the last questions we have here is, how should startups measure their brand and PR?
Same as everything else. There's no difference.
Yeah, exactly. It ties a lot into what we've been discussing all along. It's really, I think we could probably even say it at the same time, Chris, but it's all about the bottom line, and just connecting PR to, your business outcomes, and, like you would anything else. If you're doing a lot of great activity, but you're not, you don't have a focus on the bottom line, then it's really just it's not worth it. It's not worth anything.
Yeah, let's tackle Andrews that are in the Q&A here. The first one, what impact will GA4 have on attribution analysis, specifically in relation to PR's role in attribution models? If you've set up GA4 properly, it has actually some really good data-driven attribution models built right in. The challenge is you just have to set it up properly, so it's tracking that. But it actually has, I think, one of the best out-of-the-box attribution models now of all the free software that's available to you. So just set it up properly, and hey, shameless plug, if you need help, that's what we do. Andrew asks, and this is an interesting one. Do you think PR people are leaving money on the table or not properly valuing what they've achieved? SEOs talk about link earning versus link building, and the most valuable links take real effort and are hard to get. Who is better placed to get a major media site to run editorial with a link, PR or SEO? So, Aaron, what's your take? Because you used to be an SEO guy.
I did used to be an SEO guy, and ooh, that's a really heavy one, because like I think that what I experience more at in PR is that it's really more about, I don't think PR people are thinking as much about the backlinks. They're really only thinking about the mentions and the getting the quote in there, whereas an SEO person's really all about the backlinks. So yeah, like that's where I think that's probably the one exception that I would say is that everyone says that they want to be in the New York Times. An SEO person really wants to be in the New York Times. They want a backlink from the New York Times. That's what they're talking about when they say that. Whereas a PR person might be saying, I want to be mentioned in the New York Times. And that's probably the big difference. Whereas an SEO person also might say, I'd rather go after a lot more of those smaller tier companies and get, backlinks from those rather than go after a big one and not actually even get a link or get a no follow link or whatever it is. In that regard, I would say, I think PR people are probably a little bit more in tune with speaking with journalists. And so if they just shift that mindset, they're probably actually better suited for getting those backlinks if they can actually, think that way a little bit more and sort of adjust that way of thinking, and get some more of those quality backlinks potentially. But it just, as it is, SEO people are the ones that are doing it right now, and they're the ones that are aggressively doing it.
The one thing I think PR folks bring to the table that SEO folks almost uniformly don't have is relationships with some of the various sources and things, to the point where if you come up and say like, hey, I've got this great story about, how Trust Insights has released this new thing, and all the reporters in the MarTech space, you can say, Scott's going to want this one. Scott would write about this. I know Scott. I know him pretty well. I know his coverage. Let's get you talking to Scott. And you would say that, and Anand's not interested. So he would have, there's no point in pitching him there. That those relationships to the I guess the more prominent media sources, that's where PR folks can really shine, because you might be able to get into something that frankly you might not with a traditional SEO approaches.
Yep, totally. I think the end of that question is also, do PRs routinely track and calculate the value and impact of those backlinks? So I don't think that they typically do. We have those, we do track those in Propel, but yeah, it's not something that's traditionally being tracked and monitored. I also see here, which is really cool, Marion wrote here that she got the exact same treatment from Chewy. They have the best customer service. So I wish I'm in Israel. We don't have it. I wish I kind of wish that I was able to, because I would be ordering from them in a second if they were here. The last thing that we have is and we literally have time for one more. So what's the best way to generate content for social media?
I mean, the best way to generate content, it depends on the quality of content. If you want to generate mediocre content, use AI. There's so many good content generation tools right now that can generate acceptably mediocre content at scale. You'll never have want for boring, repetitive corporate blog posts. If you want really great content, you've got to invest in people, give them time to do it, give them budget, let them, develop ideas and things like a real creative studio. It's your content's got to be useful. It's going to be either useful or entertaining, or both, ideally both. And here's the test. This is the easiest test about your own content. Would you, if you did not work for your company, would you get out your wallet, get some money out of your wallet? Would you pay any amount of money for your company's content? If the answer is no, then you've got a content quality problem.
Totally. That's awesome. I think that's spot on. Well, we're basically all out of time. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here today. I think we answered some of these questions, the other questions that we had in the middle, and we're literally all out of time. Just a couple quick shameless plugs over here. Make sure to sign up for Chris. Do you want to talk a little bit about that for a second? your Slack channel?
We have a free Slack community. Go to TrustInsights.ai/analytics for marketers. It's free to sign up. You and 2,400 other marketers asking and answering each other's questions every day. Some of the data that was in today's deck actually we put in Slack this morning. So please come on over and have some fun and be nerds with us. That's
Awesome.
just how we get friends.
Awesome. And if you want to check out Propel, we did just launch our free CRM for PR. It's a PRM. You can go and check that out for free at propelmypr.com/free and give it a spin and see what you think. But it is totally free, no strings attached. And with that, thank you again so much, Chris. If anyone has any more if anyone wants any more information or has any follow-up questions, feel free to email me at aaron@propelmypr.com or follow up with Chris at cspenn@TrustInsights.ai. And we will speak with you all soon again. And we'll send out the recording as soon as it's ready.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.